So thank you for joining. Appreciate it. The title of this webinar is Beyond the NAR Settlement, Leveraging Tech to Redefine Real Estate Success. And I'm going to go around the horn first and foremost and talk about the rules for a second, and then we'll do introductions of everybody. So just to the rules of the masterclass are that typically we say it's not an infomercial. I will say this time it is a touch more. Only because, not because these people are on or I'm on to promote our products, but really to talk about how our products fit into the changing nature and landscape of the industry. So this really is, yes, it will be a little more infomercially-y, but really the goal, and we had a prep call, is really to talk about how we think that we can pivot our businesses, or our businesses are already well suited to what's happening and the changes. We will talk about the changes a little bit, but the feeling is, and I think Zane said best, there's a lot of confusion in the industry about what's happening and how do we do business today, what tools are best suited to the changes, or businesses, and I do think this is part of, frankly, a continued conversation of how to think a little bit differently. It's not like it's going to change overnight and all of a sudden we're all in a different industry, but the industry is changing, and that's exciting, and we do need to change the way we meet those needs, the different needs. And everybody on this call has been in the industry a while. So we have seen more than a couple of pivots in our time. Nobody here is a newbie. So we just want to respect the different sectors of the industry and how we might meet those changes. So that is my little spiel. We will go around, and the first thing we'll do is kind of let everybody introduce themselves and do like a 2-minute again about, again, not infomercial, but of what they do and what their company does. And then we'll go into talking about some of the changes and how those products meet those changes. So again, a last rule of the masterclass of non-infomercial is that we could be 10 minutes in this meeting, we could be 15, we could be an hour. We never prescribe. We'll go till the conversation goes. Please do, again, put up Q&A. I will look for it at the end. I'll jump in if it's something that needs jumping in on, but please do feel free to ask questions. We welcome the conversation. Okay, who wants to go first? I'm going to go with you, Nick. You look ready, man. You got your ready face on.
The only rule of masterclass is don't talk about masterclass.
Yeah, unless you're talking about it afterwards, and in which case we encourage you to
talk about it. It's over Black Manhattan.
Right.
My name is Nick Van Valkenburg. I'm the Vice President of Business Development for Roof AI. If you don't know Roof AI, we've been developing AI for the last 7 years. We are an AI assistant that sits on brokerage websites, communicates with consumers, allows them to find homes and kind of assist them almost like a tier 1 agent would, providing value right out of the gate. And we also do business with all of the core services and affiliate businesses that a brokerage has.
Thank you. Thank you for that. By the way, based on the question I did get, I am Audrey Whittington, the Senior Vice President at Local Logic. So I'll jump in next. Just so you know, and we'll get in. Local Logic basically does all the data outside the 4 walls. And we will certainly also be contributing as to some of the products we think that are meeting the changes in the industry. So what about you, Katie?
Katie Smithson, Chief Revenue Officer for RE Core. RE Core is a new company that was founded in January 2024. Basically, it's kind of a creation from CRMLS, California Regional MLS. And Art's vision was kind of just spin off a new company in order to take the technology that had been built at CRMLS and basically take it to market. So that's what I'm doing. We essentially have 2 divisions. One is like an MLS software as a service division. The other is data licensing. So we're, just creating and innovating and trying to make the real estate industry a better place.
Okay, awesome. What about you, Zane?
Hi, everybody. Zane Burnett. I am VP of Innovation and Insight over at Rechat. Rechat is an experience management platform. What that means is we've built a suite of world-class products that allow agents to conduct all of their business within the same ecosystem and in the same place to help them better manage the experience that their consumers and clients have throughout the real estate journey. And part of that suite does include a really powerful and meaningful AI co-pilot. And that's part of the Rechat ecosystem as well.
Okay, cool. We'll get into all of these details a little more. And best for last, Tim, of course. Go ahead.
Oh, well, thank you. So I'm Tim Quirk. I'm co-founder of Final Offer. What do we do? Well, have you ever sold a property and felt like you left money on the table? Or can
Yes.
you ask the four panelists? Have you ever made an offer on a property, not had it accepted, and wonder why? And then you see what it went for, and you're like, hey, I would have paid more than that. That's what Final Offer is about. So we built a consumer-facing, agent-driven offer negotiation platform for residential real estate that allows real estate agents to be at the heart of the transaction and to be able to negotiate with complete transparency. It includes real-time alerts, guaranteed offer presentation, and the ability for folks to do something I'll talk about a little later that buyers have always wanted to do.
Okay, cool. Excellent. All right. Thank you guys for the introduction. So let's take a minute and let's talk about the industry and the change in the industry, and then we'll dive in. And one thing I realized on the prep call that I will tell our esteemed audience is that each of these people's actually businesses relate to different sectors of the industry. So MLS, broker, agent, etc. So consumer. So we are actually, what's nice about this group, I'd like to say I thought of it ahead of time. I think I did a little bit, but I don't remember, was that we are attacking different sectors of the industry and how those changes. So let's talk about the changes. So the changes in the industry, I'm going to kind of go through some of the ones that I'm aware of, and I'm going to go around and talk to each of the panelists and say, again, not necessarily as it relates to your product right away. Let's just talk about making sure that we're all aligned on the changes. So there, because again, Zane likes to point out there's a lot of confusion. So changes, my perspective changes. And look, I'm in the dark now, so there you go. My perspective of changes is that number one, the biggest elephant in the room is that the buyer, in order to use a buyer broker agent, first of all, will have to have a buyer broker agreement, and that the seller never really had to pay the buyer's agent, but now is really being made very clear that they don't have to pay the buyer's agent. That's really the biggest change, right? Hands down. And that compensation is no longer in the MLS. So as sort of what was, deemed to be sort of pejorative, like if it was in the MLS, therefore it was a cost of doing business. I'm going to go around and see if there's others that I missed. I'll go to you, Zane, but those are the big changes that are really going to affect and tee us up for the products that we're talking about. So Zane, did I miss any? And I think there are more, but
Yeah, I think that's the biggest one.
yeah.
And a lot of that spawns a lot of questions, which I know we're going to get into,
Yeah.
about what that means and how to do business. And there's even some sort of questions tangential to that sort of big change that are worth addressing as well.
Okay. You want to, Nick? I see it.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I would say like the one thing that everybody's trying to figure out, and I think a lot of agents are trying to figure out is like, how do they show their value now? Like when
Yep.
I'm a buyer in the early start of my searching for a home, like how can you help me? How does that work? I think just being more transparent on how that helps. I don't think any or many buyers are interested in jumping into the market and trying to do it on their own. That would scare me. I can barely buy a suit jacket by myself, let alone a whole house. So yeah, I just, what I'm hearing from folks that I'm talking to in the brokers, they're just kind of fielding a lot of questions right now. So, I mean, nothing's changed yet. I'm also reading that really nothing is changing. Just there's more clarity, but business for the most part will be as usual.
Well, I think that's an interesting question. Is anything really changing, relatively speaking? Is this really about the consumer becoming more knowledgeable as to what they have to pay for and what they don't have to pay for and what's expected? I am in the industry and did not know when I sold my house last year or about a year or so ago that I didn't have to pay the buyer's agent. It doesn't mean I wouldn't have, but I didn't really know that it was optional. I didn't, and I'm in the industry. So I think local logic, we do try and I do think this is about educating the consumer. I think to your point, we like to say that we do think we're well positioned for this because it is about educating not only the consumer, but also the agents and helping them prove value. I am going to turn that, I know that's a perfect segue for you, Tim, but before I go to you, I think Katie, for the MLSs, huge change, and that's your field
Yeah.
of, so we can say that there's not much change, but I think for the MLSs, it's massive.
Right. I mean, there's going to be rule changes that that impact the way MLSs operate, and that impacts the technology too. I mean, just thinking about the fact that right now compensation in most MLS systems is a required field, and there's going to have to be changes that are implemented for the MLS system vendors to make those changes. And it's not an easy process. So I think that's one thing that might be a little bit lost in the discussions of the lawsuits, is the timing of how this is all going to come into play.
Yeah.
I know that the MLS system vendors are already talking about this,
Oh,
but
yeah.
there's, I don't know what the final number is now, but like 500 something.
It's like 580 or
MLSs,
560. I think it's 560.
that's what, yeah, right. Yeah, and so all those systems have to be changed and updated, and the data has to be, updated as well. So it's going to take some time, and it's not going to be an easy process. But I think this is just one area where we're all going to have to work together, and that's where new technology systems can come into play and hopefully make things easier.
Well,
But
some of the
again,
jokes, forgive me for jumping in here, some of the jokes that some of the MLS folks, and I do have the benefit in my job of talking to brokers, agents, MLS, prop tech, I have for a lot of years. And some of the jokes going around, if you'll forgive me, Katie, are that it'll be like if the price ends in 250, that it's like that's the
right.
compensation percentage, or that
That's,
it'll
yep.
be buried
Yeah.
in the picture. It'll be like in a sign in the picture of the listing.
Yeah.
The
So
No,
there's
I was reading about that the other day, and it's like that, this concept that like agents will find ways to put the compensation
well, they
out
have
there,
before.
but how long is that gonna how long is that gonna last? But whatever, you just keep getting creative, putting
Well,
new ideas out there.
And you're right. And I do think, like, one MLS executive said to me yesterday, they said, well, what happens now? Like, who do they believe? And this is going to go directly. This is my perfect tee up for you, Tim. Just to talk about what you think and why you're doing what you're doing. But what does the consumer believe in terms of percentages of the comp? Like, if it's not, the whole point of it being in the MLS was to protect the consumer, right? To some degree. Certainly that's not the way it's being portrayed in the media. But how is the consumer then protected in terms of one person calls the agent and they get what's X some percentage? Like, the information is no longer documentable as to what the compensation is. So Tim, I'll get your thoughts on that. And
Yeah.
again, we're not infomercialing, but I know this does dovetail into what you do.
I think it's I think the discussion's at a higher level, right? So so like Nick, you talked about in one sentence, you said transparency and show your value, and the whole industry has been talking about that, but no one's been talking about how, right? And so what we've done as a company, because we touch the entire ecosystem, we touch the consumer, the agent, the brokerage. The agent and brokerages are our customer, and they're near and dear to our life, and that's who we serve. But what you got to also understand is, how does the overall market look at the industry? And so we've done these types of webinars, and we've polled hundreds of real estate agents, and we've asked them a simple question: do you trust other agents? What percent do you think say they do trust other agents?
Oh, it's got to be like 2. I mean, there's no way the agents don't trust each other at all.
9%, right? So 91%, we asked, do you trust other agents? And 91% say no, right? And so this isn't about the overall underlying feeling is that where don't they trust other agents? It's in the negotiation. And when relationships go sour in this industry, it all has to do with the negotiation. And so if the agents don't trust themselves, then you go up a level. How do you expect the consumer to trust the process? And compensation is just one part of a much bigger picture, which is, what is the overall experience of buying or selling a property? And if you could have more information up front to understand how the process is going to be run, compensation is negotiable, and you bring that element to the forefront at the very beginning of when you're listing a property or when you're making an offer on a property, it streamlines the process significantly. So for sellers, if they want to offer a buyer compensation, why can't they? They should be able to. It's called a variable rate commission. And no one in the industry wanted to talk about it until now, where it happens all the time. You go to a seller and say, hey, I'll charge you a 6% commission. But they ask you, well, will you take some off if I end up bringing the buyer directly, or you find them? Well, yeah, sure, I'll lower it by a percentage, right? This happens all the time.
Yeah,
but
not anymore.
It hurts the seller and it hurts the buyer potentially, because decisions might be made unbeknownst to them as to who ultimately has their offer accepted. What if you just put it
Well,
out,
yeah, and it's all about dual agency, right?
right?
The brokers have been seeding it for a long time, and
So
I
just
love
put
my
it out
broker
there.
clients, but
But
you
just
know,
put it out there in the public and let the negotiation happen the way it happens. And great agents are, I actually think that the best agents in the market are going to actually make more. And I don't mean more as they're going to take more volume. I actually think they'll be able to get more as a percentage because they're going to actually be able to show their value of what they do.
yeah, I actually think that I don't disagree, and this is not a politically correct answer. I actually, a very good friend of mine is an agent. I've said I actually think you'll make a more stable income, I think even if you do go to a concierge model or whatever, where an agent will say, hey, I'm going to pay you a flat 2 to 5 grand, whether, and you're going to help me look for the, let's say 30, 60, 90 days, but I'm going to pay you no matter what. I always say it's sort of akin to if a dishwasher guy comes or somebody you have a repair appliance person, they come, you pay them whether to look at it, period. You pay for their time. It's added if you were into a much larger bill. I know we don't want to compare agents to appliance repair, so forgive me if I've offended anybody, but the idea is that you are compensated for your time ahead of time. And I asked a friend of mine who was looking at buying a house, and I said, because this is very timely to talk to her, and I said, would you pay for an agent? Let me ask you a question. Would you pay a flat fee for an agent? Because she wants to use an agent. And she said, yeah, I would have paid 5 grand on a flat fee. So ask yourself what happens then. Buyers are acknowledging that they're serious. They're putting up money, right? They are showing their value just by the nature of being paid up, sort of quote unquote upfront or on retainer. It's no different than an attorney, right? So I do think it's going to change. I think it is actually better for agents. I do. I think it sort of illuminates the service they do bring to the agents. And I think the other thing is that, yeah, we're going to put a little bit more onus on consumers, but consumers are 99% online anyway first, right? I mean, that's why Candidly Local Logic is doing well, because we provide a lot of information to consumers and agents to get to be an expert. But at the end of the day, the seller does not want them to walk into the house without an agent, right? So, I mean, Zane or Nick or Katie, any more on that before we move to the next topic?
What I'll say is, and maybe I'm saying this just to put it out there, is we've talked a lot about how the agents are going to handle this, and I know we're going to talk about how the agents can handle this, but the biggest uncertain too is how are the consumers going to handle this? There's a
Yeah,
ton of sensationalized headlines out there.
yeah.
I've gotten calls from, my family, my friends, and, everywhere from, does that mean I can, everything's going to go, like, commissions are going to drop 3% and everything's going to cost less, to, does that mean I have to come out of pocket to pay a buyer? And so I think that we're all like, this is a really great example of how we're talking to our audience of agents and brokers on how to prepare to be able to adjust and pivot as needed. But the big uncertain for me is how are the consumers actually going to react to this when the changes actually go into effect? And I think it talks to the point that Tim and Nick made earlier, which is by equipping ourselves now with all the possible outcomes of how the consumers may react, we can kind of put more arrows in our quiver, for lack of a better term, to be able to articulate and educate, which is going to have to happen on a case by case basis, for the first, in the short term, at the very least, in the best case scenario. And so I think that's really important too, is do we have the means to be able to communicate what those changes mean when the pavement hits the road when it comes to consumer?
Well, and that's a perfect segue to the next section of this, so we'll move on. But I do think that's a perfect example too of, are we communicating something different at the brokerage level that wants their agents to keep right, not to be afraid, versus at the MLS level, right? Versus at, the levels, the communication, I do think is, you did bring this up in the prep, that the communication is not consistent, and is not the same message, right? Depending on who you're hearing it from. So
I've
I
been
think,
hearing,
go
sorry,
ahead, Nick.
yeah, I've been hearing from the brokers that I'm working with that, we're planning, we're not panicking. It's just kind
Yeah,
of the steps that they're taking. They're fielding a lot of questions, and agents are also reading the headlines, right? And so like, whoa,
sure,
what's
of course,
going
right.
on here? And am I in the wrong spot? And everybody's like, just pump your brakes. It's going to be fine.
Yeah. And I think there's truth to that, honestly. I do. I think we'll find middle ground. Well, so all right. We'll segue in to sort of our products and how they meet those needs. And again, we'll try not to keep it too infomercially. We'll just try and say, what we think, how we're best suited to this pivot. I did pick products that I thought were best suited to the pivot, so I would ask you to listen and learn, but take it at face value. I'll go first and set the tenor. Just at Local Logic, we are all the data outside the first wall, outside of the four walls. So what we do is everything to help the consumer understand where they're going to live and what that means. And I do think like we're well positioned for that, because I do think both in terms of local expertise, you saw Homes.com spent $1 billion on it. So whether we're in Matrix, which we are today, or any of the MLS systems, or we're on major portals like Realtor.com or whatever it is, whether we're giving the member proprietary information like with CMLS, or we're helping the consumer understand by going to a member-facing site or a portal, anything. I do think like we all need to get more educated, and I think this was happening, frankly, long before this pivot. Because of COVID, we work where we live and we live where we work. And I think we have to understand and be more educated. And whether the consumer's doing it first or the agent is proving value, it doesn't matter. So that's where we are. So I will go to Tim. I'm going to mix it up. So why don't you go next?
Sure, yeah. So as I mentioned, so we built it's an offer negotiation platform for real estate. So this is for listing agents to be able to bring to their clients and list property. And so the way that we all list property today, again, there's not much transparency in it. There's a list price and property details. A list price doesn't mean anything. It's just an advertisement. So what if sellers could actually be more forthcoming and put up front what they'd actually commit to take with pricing, with terms, and even with timing, right? So give everyone a fair shot. And with people coming into open houses wondering, is there really an offer on the table? We were told there's an offer, but how do you know? Well, what if you could actually see online in real time that there really is an offer, scan a QR code, and be able to get real-time text when offers come in, right? We had this happen yesterday. We had a property up north of Boston. The thing went crazy. All the buyers had the information in their fingertips to decide, is it time to walk away, or is it time for me to double down and make an improved offer, right? And so that's what it's all about, is that when it comes to this particular part of the process, compensation is just a negotiation. So could the seller say, I will offer compensation to the buyer agent, or I will not, or buyers submit the compensation that you want as part of the negotiation to be able to cover the cost for your agent. That's what happens.
So
Right?
final offer is just full transparency, really. It's just complete transparency.
It's full transparency if you want it to be, but
understood.
And there's different elements of it. But what it allows the agents to do is to be able to negotiate in a way that at least put more information up front for every buyer to know what are table stakes and what's on the table that the seller will actually commit to, right? Can I
talk about my favorite part of your platform? By the way, Final Offer is in 8 states now and growing very rapidly. I think in another 8, like next month or whatever. But my favorite thing about Tim's thing is the buy now. So can you talk about that for 1 second? And then
so we give sellers the opportunity to list with 1, 2, or 3 prices. So they can have a list price just like you do today. And at least if an offer comes in, people will have a guaranteed offer registered, and you can see it online. Anyone in the public can see that a real offer came in. You won't be able to see the details of it, but you'll know for a fact. Sellers can also put what we call a final offer price and terms on it. Buyers have never had the opportunity to be able to come in and make an offer they know would be accepted immediately. If you make the final offer, the property's off the market immediately and you can move forward in the transaction. We've had over 500 properties that have sold on this last year. And as Audrey mentioned, we're growing by leaps and bounds. What's fascinating about the final offer is that 34% of the properties that sold on our platform last year sold via the final offer.
Well, look, where it's not fascinating. I mean, it's a no-brainer, and I do want to move on. Well, not just, we're in a housing shortage. So, I mean, a friend of mine, she was making an offer, she would have done final offer. She got beat out by a cash offer. The cash offer probably would have saved the other trouble, just would have bought it and taken it off. So in truth, like I admit, I probably would be a final offer kind of person.
Yeah, I mean, so Audrey, look, this is what it is there's no more haggling, right? The first buyer that ever made an offer that got accepted on our property had lost 17 times over 2 years trying to get into a home. And they couldn't do it because they didn't know what they didn't know in that market.
Yeah. All right, let me move on. I'm going to move to Nick because I think it's a good segue. So Nick, tell me, I know about Roof. I love Roof, as you know. So tell me a little bit about how it helps where we are in the new paradigm.
I love Roof too. So for the folks that maybe weren't on in the beginning, we are an AI company. We've been actually building our own language model, so our large language model for the past 7 years, and machine learning. We've added layers with Bard. We've added layers with ChatGPT. So like the whole idea of our business is turn your website conversational. So when we talk about how do we bring value to buyers, and we talk a lot about that like at the agent level, but what about at the brokerage level, at the beginning of not even the transaction, but just like the searching for properties? Like, how do you provide value, and what value can you provide? Well, if I'm looking for a home, I'm obviously trying to find what I'm looking for in neighborhoods and price ranges, but I may also be curious about the real estate industry. I may be seeing terms on there I don't understand. What's contingent mean? Or what's the difference between pre-approval or pre-qualified or something like that? Now, I don't know if you've ever Googled any of these things. And if anybody on this calls from any of the portals, please earmuffs. But if you Google something like, should I buy a house before I sell? Almost every research result, Zillow, Realtor.com, Redfin, Rocket Mortgage, these companies, the lead aggregators, they have all of this, this blog everywhere. They've got blogs about everything. And so they're pulling your traffic away. And so what we do is we turn it conversational on the site. I can be looking for properties. I can use local logic data to understand what's going on in the neighborhood or different neighborhoods that I'm not familiar with. And I can ask questions about real estate. And ultimately our goal is let's keep you conversing on the site, because that's when you're going to turn into a customer. So
Okay, so you're really like your stuff is about the consumer. And to your point on the whole new modeling and the new paradigm, again, like us, if the consumer is going to go searching, feel that the onus is on them a little bit more to
yeah,
do a little more of the work. We all think they'll end up with an agent, but if they feel like they have a responsibility, right, a little bit more so, then they're going to need these tools like in a big way. All right,
they've
I'm
got
going to
to
go.
they've got to get you to the agent.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Last thing I'll say before you cut me off,
No, no, no,
feel
no.
free to use the little hook thing,
I know, it's all good.
and I'll just slide off the side. But when you think about searching for homes, like every real estate website is almost the same, right? I mean, you don't want it to differ too much because you need the experience to be similar. So I know how to
That's
search
true.
for homes. But
That's
what's the
true.
difference between me going to this website versus the website from the brokerage across the street? Like it's the same property. So we're providing a different value and bringing a different product to the consumer. So that's our whole thing.
Yeah, well, look, you have some major customers. You have a lot of major brokerages that use you in terms of Baird and Custom. You've got some big customers. So, and I know for a fact, some of those folks would never do it if it didn't work. So there you go. Zane, I'm going to finish with you, Katie. You get to be the best for last. Zane, go ahead.
Perfect. So yeah, we talked a lot. I've heard the word experience thrown out a lot. And I think that's going to be a very important thing to manage from several facets and perspectives when it comes to what this market's going to look like after summer. At Rechat, we were kind of built from the ground up with the idea of being able to empower agents to be able to effectively manage that experience. And so, you know, I think T3 put out a stat last year that said the average agent uses 13 or 14 different tools. And I've been in brokerage for a long time prior to this, and I've seen, you know, the browser tabs that are like spread out across an agent's desktop as they're trying to like just do the simplest of things. And so I feel like the longer that continues to exist, the more burdensome it becomes, because it's just another thing that agents have to do and figure out, and agents already have enough on their plate as it is. And the way I feel like we're able to come in and help is that we provide a consolidated view of seamlessly integrated products where you literally only have to work from one tab. And everything that you're doing is on brand and the messaging is unified, which is also important from a brokerage perspective, because I've seen some of the stuff that agents put out in postcards, in flyers, on bus stop benches, you know, you name it. And, you know, sometimes I wonder if like their kindergartner put it together. No offense to agents. But, you know, like what's missing, I think, is a way to congruently curate that experience with the consumer. And so we feel very strongly that we're best positioned to be able to do that and to do it easily, so that as an agent, you can just kind of move on with your life and dedicate your efforts and focus towards the things that require more bandwidth.
So, and again, dovetailing that, bringing that sort of back to message, again, focusing on the consumer, the agent, how the agent can, so in Nick's world, they're getting direct to the consumer and passing it to the agent. And then when it gets to the agent, if the onus is on the agent more of a new landscape to frankly do their job a little with a slightly higher level of quality, if you'll forgive me, or certainly in terms of how they present themselves, let's face it, as the quote unquote local expert, then you guys help with that. I will go over to Katie. Katie, I'm not going to lie to you. I think people don't always know what RE Core does or how it fits into this conversation. So I told you I was going to be tough on you a little bit. So I think you need to take a little time and explain why RE Core. Just take a minute and like, why RE Core? What does RE Core do? Why are they here? And how does it fit into this paradigm? Because I think there is confusion around RE Core. I like what some of the stuff, but even for me, like I know RE Distribute, I'm a big fan, blah blah blah. But
there's a lot of RE stuff out there right now.
Right. You said it. Perfect.
A lot of it has actually stemmed from CRMLS. So so RE Core, I mean, really the reason that RE Core was formed was because of, in 2020, 2021, we saw a lot of mergers and acquisitions with a lot of the tools and products that are out there that agents and brokers use. A lot of those tools were licensed by MLSs. And what happens is you see, either the quality is degraded or there's just a lack of adoption. And not to dig on Zillow, because I did work at Zillow for about a year. Great group of people, very smart. I enjoyed my time there, but there's a conception out in the industry that Zillow is, the bad guy, quote unquote. And so when Zillow acquired ShowingTime, for example, there was a lot of heartburn around the fact that, this is a broker that now owns a major showing platform. And a lot of agents, I think, were concerned about where's their data going, or, they're essentially, if the MLS is offering ShowingTime as a member benefit, then, their member dues are going to pay this competing broker. So all that to be said, what happened in 2020 and 2021 with the acquisitions and the mergers and all the money that was going into prop tech, CRMLS had been building technology, and the one I'm going to focus on here in a minute I'll talk about, but CRMLS had been building this technology, and it just seemed like an opportunity to get out there and provide other MLSs with peace of mind that RE Core is being formed as a new entity to provide these technology services, with the idea that we're not looking to grow and build revenue up so we can sell off to a bigger company. We want to keep this a nimble company that is responsive and acutely aware of the needs and pain points of MLSs and associations, but also keeping in mind what is best for the brokers and agents that are using these tools. And I think that all filters. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I think that all filters down to making a better experience for the consumer.
Okay, cool. All right. So really what your pitch, and you're kind of coming in with it, and I'm going to go to questions because we've gotten some good ones, right? And then I think that'll take us a little time. But you're really, the thing about RE Core as much as anything is, look, I would say this about RE Core, like for you guys, just again, my objective 2 cents is, the industry has a lot of, some PE companies and some private companies that are, do a lot with how the industry moves. And this is really an effort to have sort of like somebody within it's like if you run the marathon and you're actually running the marathon, you're a runner, you're an actual runner, They always say, don't run a sales team if you've never sold. So this is, I think that the effort is, hey, we really do this every day. So we really understand your needs and we're trying to meet them. And just give you other choices, because certainly the choices out there are also very good, but just to give people alternatives. Is that a fair statement?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
All right. Okay. I'm going to get a job at RE Core later. So, all right, let's go through some questions. because we've got a lot of questions, we got a lot of comments. One question was, I wondered this too. So whoever anonymous attendee is, what would be interested in your views on how NAR could impact Canada. Now, this one's a nice one for Local Logic because we obviously serve the US and Canada pretty, pretty broadly. So I do think it'll have I don't think it'll have an immediate effect. Personally, this is my 2 cents. I'd be curious if anybody else has an opinion. I don't think it'll have an immediate effect, but I do think there'll be ripple effects. Um, and I certainly think it'll open the topic up for conversation. But Canada is structured so differently. Right, Nick, it's just a completely different ball of wax. And especially the way the structure and the legislative aspect. But I certainly think it'll open the conversation. Nick, do you know Canada well enough to kind of have an opinion on that?
You know what I do know? So our corporate office is in Montreal, so we're based out of
Yeah,
Canada. As you can tell by my Marshawn Lynch picture, I'm here in Seattle.
there you go.
Actually not in Canada.
Nice.
But what I do know is it's wildly different. And just from personal experience, as we bring on new employees and trying to explain the US real estate market to them, you realize like they don't really understand any of it. So do I know what how NAR is going to impact Canada? I don't, but I just know that they're completely different markets.
Okay, yeah.
So
Go
we're
ahead,
actually doing quite a bit of working. We're actually launching in Canada very shortly.
Nice.
And the reason has been we've actually had tremendous demand from the top brokerages within the Canadian market because of transparency. It's all about trust across. We're actually seeing it. We have demand across the entire world for what we're doing because the entire real estate industry as a whole has just been in the dark. And so when you look at the consumer, no matter what, I was talking to someone yesterday in Toronto and they're like, I've tried to buy a property 5 times and I still don't know. And they want to hold offers on Wednesday. And I'm like, I don't trust any of this. Right. So they're like, we bowed out. We're not even going to make an offer because we don't believe the process that we've been told is going to actually run true. So regardless of what market you're in, it still comes back to lack of transparency, where the Canadian market is actually leading the US when it comes to that, where there's a rule in Ontario, there's the TRESA, is the Trust in Real Estate. And they've been requiring offers to be registered so that an agent can pick up the phone and call a listing agent and say, do you have offers? Prove it. And they got to show them proof that there really are offers on the table, right? That's a big win for the consumer because now they have their agents that can show their value and actually show them what really is there. So it's a bigger conversation, but that impact when it comes to this, we're seeing it. We've had our clients down in the US taking a look at what's happening and vice versa to be able to understand like how they can get ahead of it.
Okay, cool. I don't disagree with that, and I do think before we move on to the next one, is that I would say that the Canadian market is very akin to Europe, and of course, there's always these comparisons to how. And having worked for News Corp, which is an Australian company, I learned, and I did some global work at my last job, that they do it so differently that the seller pays like the advertising fee like 1% up front, non-refundable. So there are different paradigms in different countries, and I do think Canada's a little more, forgive me, but a little more open to those different models than maybe the US is. I'm going to move to the next one. Zane, I didn't even know you could do that. You could say you would like to answer a question, so that's
I
cool.
didn't know that either until I accidentally did it. But
I know, I love it though. Okay, so now you've it's not really a question, but it's a comment, but it sounds like you want to take it on, and I'm game. So the comment was that taking compensation will create steering, and then I did allude to that before, right? Especially if a buyer has to have seller offered compensation. So
there's an
in other
update down
words,
below that taking compensation out of the MLS.
yes.
yeah,
Well, I think the point is like if it's not, that's to that point, right? If it's not in the
Yeah.
MLS, we talked about this earlier, how do you avoid steering?
so and that
Thanks,
was
Nick.
that was the point. Like and to kind of make it real world and give everybody a practical example, post summer, what if a buyer comes to you as an agent and then says, only show me homes where the seller is offering compensation to you because I don't want to pay anything? Is that steering? And this question was posed. I got to give a shout out to, I think it's okay, Jessica Edgerton, who was talking about this a couple of weeks ago. The question was yet at that point in time unanswered. I think it's still unclear whether or not that is technically steering. One of the things that comes into mind is prior to all of this, all of the stuff that we're talking about now, if anybody remembers, there was another lawsuit occurring where there was a discount brokerage, I'm just going to apply that term to on the West Coast, who was not offering any buyer comp for anybody who brought a buyer. And it became a really big deal because there were conversations that were recorded between traditional, MLS Realtor Associated agents and this brokerage basically saying, I'm not going to show this property if you're not offering any comp. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but like that was a huge deal before this was a huge deal.
Yeah.
And it went into the higher courts and all this stuff. So we are not, if anything, I think agents have to be prepared to be able to A, to everyone's point, defend their value. But B, I think we're still waiting to hear how to not only effectively, but legally navigate that very specific demand. Because it's one thing for an agent to say, hey, if you're not offering comp, I'm not going to show your property, which has happened in the past, and that led to a bunch of trouble. It's another thing for a consumer to say, don't show many properties where you're not going to get compensated. And I think that's the new sort of caveat to this.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
that's something we're going to have to figure out, and hopefully we'll all be provided with guidance on.
One little update to the prior question, and then I'm going to move on. And said somebody put up, thank you, that said that there is a class action lawsuit trying in Canada against the MLSs to get into the courts. Hasn't made the courts yet. So thank you for that update. I did not know that. So thank you. That we can all keep an eye on that. Another point that somebody made, I'm going to just paraphrase it because it's long. So let me just paraphrase. Let's said, could a seller say, hey, I'll list your house for X%, and then the listing agent pays the referrals fee to the buyer's agent, like via a referral fee. I think, hopefully I got that right. Katie, I don't know if you have any 2 cents on that, but I think, again, this is sort of the new Wild West of trying to find ways to work it out between two agents, right? And again, I can't imagine that would be okay to be in the MLS under the new rules, but
Yeah, I don't think you can necessarily put it in as a referral fee, but I think the conversations that have been happening have been more around price concessions. So, offering a concession and, maybe it's like 3% towards repairs or something along those lines that could be included, or, like right now, obviously rate buy downs are, pretty popular. So those could be examples of concessions, or there might just be, a general, like the seller is willing to offer concession. And then it has to, I think, become a conversation between the seller's agent and the buyer's agent. But, I think there's still a lot that's got to be figured out. There's still a lot that's up in the air. There's also, I think, there's some interpretation of the settlement where like the brokers could actually still display compensation on their own site, not in the MLS.
I wondered about that actually the other day.
Right. Yeah. But then MLSs might come on top of that and say, no, you can't do that. So yeah, I think there's still a lot to be sorted out.
So that goes into another comment, and then I'll turn it to Tim one second.
I was going to say, so I was
ahead,
talking
Tim.
about this variable rate commission before, right? And how the industry hadn't want to talk about it because the agents, we learned this firsthand. All that we did was we built a platform to allow agents to negotiate however they wanted. We had an agent that put a variable rate commission before this happened, a year and a half ago. And the agents in the market went crazy, being like, why are you disclosing that to the public? You cannot allow consumers to know that exists because we're going to get paid less. And what it is now, we have the same agents calling us saying, can we use your platform to put a variable rate commission in so that we can talk with our sellers and we can provide a fair playing field for every single buyer, whether they are working with an agent or whether they're not. They know how their offer will be ultimately weighed and valued versus someone else, regardless if they're working with an agent or whether they're not. So the ability for a seller to say, I'll offer a variable rate commission. And if you have an agent, that's great. You can have that agent, you can put an offer in the platform. You're just gonna have to pay a little more than someone else that wouldn't. But guess what? As long as your house appraised, it works just the way it does today and it's rolled into the mortgage and nothing changes.
Okay, let me
Really sets a level field for everyone to be
Yeah.
able to. Right.
On that note, and I'm gonna get the last word in here, but on that note, I think it is interesting about the point that Katie pointed out about our friends at Zillow and Realtor and Homes, and many are clients of mine, so I'm gonna be kind, but I do think it does raise the question of this whole question of a de facto national MLS. I think somebody put that as a comment on, and that's a good one, which is, what point, so Zillow's a paper brokerage in effect, right? And so do they have to follow by the same rules? Can Zillow put commission compensation on? Do they follow by those rules? Do they not? Realtor is technically not, obviously, to my knowledge, a brokerage. So, where's the lines? It gets kind of gray. And I think, again, I'll just start this webinar and end this webinar with my friend Zane here in terms of the confusion, and what's possible and what's not. Maybe we look a little more to NAR for guidance on this. Don't say it. Don't take that bait. And so, don't do it. And so you can do it. But in the meantime, I do want to, in the last minute, because I hate to go right up against two. People need to get ready for their next meeting. Can we all give a little email, please, as to somebody has already asked for where a panelist can be contacted. So can you just kind of give your email address really quick around the horn? I'm obviously Audrey at locallogic.co. You've probably gotten emails from me. We are .co, so feel free to find me there. But Nick, can you go next?
Nick at roof.ai.
Okay.
Email
Nick
myself off, apparently.
I know. Zane?
Zane at rechat.com.
Okay. All right. Tim?
Tim at finaloffer.com.
We're all bigwigs. We have first names going with our
That's how you
thing.
know
Go
you can get
ahead.
it.
I know. Yes,
Yeah.
That's
Katie?
the way to do it.
Uh,
It's Katie at recore.net.
Okay. All right. Hopefully everybody wrote that down. If you
Can I just say
don't,
one thing? I'm not going to
oh,
take.
I knew you were going to do it. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm
Do
not
it.
going to
I
take the
knew
bait
it.
that you threw out there earlier, but I do want to say, because there's something terrifying about a very specific possibility that Katie mentioned, which is, what happens if the MLSs decide to tell member brokers not to display compensation. I will just say that's terrifying to me, because I feel like this is an opportunity for any gripes that people may or may not have with just NAR or the MLSs in general. I feel like this is also an opportunity for them to be able to reset and find how to be in better flow with their members. So I would just encourage, if there is anybody listening who's representing an MLS or even NAR for that matter, to maybe, before rushing to make any decisions in light of these changes, to at the very least take into consideration what's best for the members and what's best for the technology providers who are assisting them.
Oh, imagine that, to take into consideration their vendors. Don't get crazy. That's just crazy talk, and I'm cutting
All
you
right,
off.
so then just the members.
I know. Well, thank you all for joining. Hopefully this has been a good masterclass. I don't know what the next one is, so I can't promote it. I'll probably know by next week, so we'll let you know as soon as we know. I'm always actually open to new. I will say this. I don't say this. I said this last couple of times. We do this monthly, and if you have ideas for things you'd like to hear a conversation about, and maybe even people you'd like to hear from, I can't make any guarantees, but I'm open. This really is an industry forum to have these kind of conversations. So if there's things you feel like we're not talking about, let me know. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, panelists, for joining. Appreciate
Audrey,
it.
thank you for hosting.
Thanks,
Oh,
My
Audrey.
pleasure. My pleasure. All right. Go have those cocktails. Remember.
All right.
Okay.
All
It's
All right.
5 o'clock
Bye-bye, everybody.
somewhere.
That's right. Exactly. Thank you.